Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Binford Chronicles. I'm Joanne Binford, and joining me today is Steve Meyer. Now, Steve is an advocate for Republicans adopting demographic political strategies. And Steve also has an interest in election law absurdities. One such absurdity are universal primary contests, and that's what I've been talking about. And these are general elections with multiple candidates from just one party held at the time of the August primaries. And you've heard me talking about this on my Facebook. I've been putting posts out because I really want everybody to get out and vote in the primaries. And funny thing is Steve reminded me that my primary wasn't I didn't lose because people didn't switch their votes. It was because everybody was able to vote because it was strictly Republican. So when the primaries like that, it's open to everybody because there's no other selection. And what actually happened in my race is people are commonly do not vote in the primary. So as a grassroots candidate, I didn't have all the contacts that, Laura had and Lowther. So I needed everybody that wanted to vote for me not to wait to the general election, but to do it in the primary. And that would have given me that push over into the general election. And I probably could have beat Lowther because Lowther came in second and I won 26% of those votes just in the primary. And I asked one of my girlfriends today after I spoke to my friend Steve, and I said, "Hey, I always thought that you didn't see my name on the ballot because you were in the primary and you didn't switch your vote." And she was like, "No, I didn't vote in the primary. I waited for the general, and your name wasn't on the ballot." So that made perfect sense to me. And it's been a while. So I'm kind of glad that Steve brought it up because that's really something that I want you guys to understand about the elections. And we're going to talk about that with Steve. Steve's really a data kind of guy, and he's always doing some research, and he's really got a lot to share with us today. But before we bring Steve on, I want to take a break for the Two for America commercial. And I want you guys to pay attention to the commercial because this is going to be worldwide, where everybody's going to pray for America on two very important dates. One is All Saints Day, and the other date is in July, and that is America's 250th birthday. So let's take a break and go to Two for America.
We're going to stop the whole world for 2 minutes. Twice. 2 different moments, 2 historical moments. First, we will gather everyone in Christian ministry, from the pastors to the janitors, in every church and ministry from the 194 nations, to pray for America, all at the same moment in time, for the first time ever, on July 3rd, on the eve of America's 250th birthday. To then kick off the global sign-up of 2 billion believers led through the unique app technology for one singular global moment of awakening on November 1st, 2026, All Saints Day, a Sunday, 2 days before America's elections. The global Christian ministry leaders and servants leading the world to a seminal moment in American history. The moment the entire world stops to pay America back by praying for America for 2 minutes.
Welcome back. Hi, Steve. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, I'm really glad that you wanted to join us today and talk about the elections, because I know that people are not accustomed to voting in in the primaries, and the primaries are very important.
They're really, well, they're actually end up not being primaries is a problem, is that if you end up with everybody running for an office that's from the same party, they call them universal primary contests, so that name's primaries in there, but they're not a primary at all. The election gets decided and at the time of the August primary, but they are not a primary election. I don't know how it ever got voted in. I look back, it was a ballot question back in the late 1990s, and it was grouped together with 3 or 4 other items. And it didn't say anything about deciding the election in August, but that's what we've ended up with.
So how do you think it plays out in the when we're doing the elections for the primaries? Because that's really the time when a lot of the grassroots candidates need to have as many votes as they can to move on to the general election. You know, to beat somebody, either an incumbent, or to beat somebody that's trying to run against the incumbent, or to, you know, try to get enough votes to make it to that general election.
Yeah, I think it's really hard if you're not part of a group or something that's pre-planned this, because if you think about it, you can enter the race up to I think it's the second Friday in June. And so if you decide to become a candidate, say next month or something, so April 1st, you decide I'm going to run for this county commission office or sheriff office or something like that. And you don't even know what's the date of your election, because if everybody's Republicans, you're going to end up with the election taking place in August. And if you have a Democrat or another party enter the election, then the election is going to be held in November. So who do you bring your message to? It's just a colossal mess. And I think it was really set up to keep conservatives out of office. When it gets down to the bottom line, because you always see this, that Florida is a closed primary state. And I say it is
Mhm.
when it isn't. So when you want to have one of these universal primary contests, it's no longer a primary. It is a general election. And a lot of people have no clue about it, especially if you move in from somewhere else, which is a lot of people. And you have the issue of people leaving town during the height of hurricane season. I think there's all kinds of trouble with it. And what I think ends up happening, if you're pretty well connected, if you've got union backing you, or if you're in some kind of NGO or something where they can say, hey, we'll send you your ballots out, get these back in August. But if you're trying to get organized like yourself, you weren't part of any group. So you
Mhm.
got no ready list to say, boy, I'm going to try to get these people to have write-in ballots or vote by mail ballots. So I just think you're at a disadvantage that just is really tough to overcome. And and the people that have been supported from the Republican Executive Committee, they haven't won anything since 2020. I mean, I just think it's set up so that people on the conservative bent of things aren't elected. And if that doesn't totally make sense, it's just if I think it's really easy for a Democrat. They only have to do it within a year, is switch parties. And then you can run as a Republican. And so, say you have two true Republicans and one Republican that's actually a Democrat that just put an R next to his or her name. And then you come to your primary and it gets open to everybody. Well, you've got about half of the counties registered Republican of the registered voters, and about half's is everything else. So those people come in and get to vote, and they're not going to vote for the most conservative Republican. And so
Mhm.
there's no way to win. And we've got to a situation now where I don't even think conservative candidates are considering running because they know they can't get past this goofy uh, universal primary contest.
Well, I think the last election that we had here, we had so many people running that were not the usual people running. We had a couple of people, but we had some grassroots people jumping in there. We had Stephen Hume in there. We had Tim Borden. We had Bob McCallum. We had several people in there running, and I think only one grassroots candidate won, all the way. Excuse me, all the way hospital district positions, and it's just really difficult to change that. It felt like it still feels that way. You know, I mean, this election, we've got for County Commission District 4, we do have a Democrat running against Daryl Lohr, a Republican. And then Melissa Dean, she jumped in the race to run against Flesher, although Flesher hasn't put in yet. So everybody's waiting to see what he's going to do.
Yeah, no, I think if there's a Democrat in the race or another party, it doesn't have to be the Democrat. As long as you close that primary and then you get the election decided in November, then I don't have a problem with it. But you end up with like the school board races are very similar to these universal primary contests, except
Hmm.
you have to get over 50% of the vote to win at the time of the primary. But you had one of the guys that won. He didn't like some of the stuff that went on and towards the end of the last school board time. So he wanted to get it, whatever it was, repealed. And he said, I have a voter mandate to, I've got a voter mandate. And he got like 55% in a two-person race, but only 30% of the voters voted at the time of the primary. So his big mandate, ended up being 16.5% of the people that would have voted in the general election. So I just think it's a scam. I don't know. It should change. And I don't, we have super majorities. Republicans have super majorities, have the governorship, but I don't hear anybody talking about changing this.
Yeah, and how do we change it? Because I know that when I ran, well, the last election was the primary. I think I saw somewhere it was 26% of voters voted in the last primary. Actually, I think it's on the card that the Republican Party is putting out to remind people to vote in August. And I was thinking, wow, man, that's not a lot of people. I mean, that's very little. So when I think about it, if I won close to 26% or 26% when I ran in the primaries in a three-man race, that meant not a lot of people voted. I don't even remember the number. I would
Well,
have to
no,
look back.
that's right. I think really, if you're not motivated, I never used to vote in the primaries because I always looked at primary voters. They probably know what's going on. They know who to vote for. And most people don't know anything about the people running for these local elections. But then I think you get people that have a motivated reason to vote. Say you work for the county or you work for the school, any of those kind of things where you're really electing your boss and they're going to be motivated to vote. Where people like me have nothing to do with the government, don't want anything to do with the government. Less government's better for me. Um, why would people like me vote at the time of the primary, especially not knowing that it's going to get decided because everybody's saying, well, it's a closed primary and it's a primary, but it's not. It's a universal primary contest. And so I just think it's structurally set up for conservative Republicans not to win. And I think that's why I think the populace is much more conservative than our state legislators. And I think that's why, is it's just set up uh, for conservative Republicans. It's just really, really hard to win.
I think it's hard to win because, like you said, there's a lot of people that have the R on their name, but they're not really true conservative Republicans. So if they do get elected into office, they're not really living up to those values and principles of what the Republican Party stands for. I mean, bigger
Well,
government.
I think it's even worse than that because you can just be a Democrat, say, "Hey, gee, I'd like to be on the county commission. I can't win. I'm going to switch my party registration." Once you're a registered Republican, I think it's for only a year. You can go ahead and run for office, and what's stopping people from doing that? And I think they are doing it. And so I say we have now what we have the apartment builders. You see apartments going up all over. I think it's just Republicans can't survive once the rentership rate gets above about 30%. And so you have apartments going up everywhere. And I think it's part of a political strategy. And the Republicans, think, are asleep on the wheel on what's going on.
Well, and I hear what you're saying because I felt that way, and I still feel that way about the the hardcore Republican executive party that really is supposed to be pushing this out and keeping the community. They're the hardcore. They're supposed to be like saying, okay, these are the rules. This is, but there's so many Democrats that have become Republicans, and I'm fine with that. But I always felt if you're a Democrat, there's no way you're going to go from being a Democrat to being a hardcore Republican. And I think people that represent the GOP and they should not be moderates. They should actually represent what the preamble is about and what the Republican Party is. Everybody else can wear an R if they want, but if you go in there and you don't have all those core values, it's just kind of it tears it apart. I mean, I remember sitting in the REC meeting, and there are some people that felt strongly about your Second Amendment, about putting laws in place for your Second Amendment rights. Or some people were in the party that, said, well, it depends on the woman. The woman should choose whether she has an abortion or not. And I was like, what are they doing in this club? Like, they shouldn't be in this club. They should be a Republican outside of the club, because this club has to live up to the integrity of what the Republican Party is supposed to stand for. And that's what's going to keep our republic strong, because they're the ones that people go to get advice on who to vote for.
Well, it actually, even that's kind of limited because you're not supposed to take sides in a battle that's people within your own party. But what was the thing I was going to say about it? And the other thing is, I think you could describe the political situation as there's really three political parties. You got the Democrats, you have the moderate Republicans, and you have the conservative Republicans. And I think a lot of moderate Republicans and Democrats don't ever want to see a conservative Republican up there, and so I just think it's stacked against conservative Republicans. So, in the biggest thing, if you're a conservative Republican, you got to vote in August. I've been saying this now for over a year. I've got a thing going, vote August with an explanation mark. You got to vote in August. Somehow you got to plan to vote in August, or you're going to get the leadership that we have, and the apartments getting built like are getting built. I just think it's nuts. But to me though, it's almost super saturated the state legislature. I'm trying to think of what the new law is. I was going to jot it down, and I don't think I did. The Live Local Act, um, which is overriding local land use to build apartments. And like, how did we get? And it got 100% support by Republican legislature, and I just beyond my uh, being able to believe they have all these Republicans, and the things set up to build rental housing, and that they're not doing anything, and that they pass it unanimously. It's just beyond my understanding.
Well, that's kind of why I was hoping that the property taxes would go away, because I think what's happened in a lot of counties, not just our county, is they're just relying on the taxpayer to bring the funds in. And then at the same time, they're donating, our tax money to nonprofit organizations. And some counties have actually made those nonprofits an extended taxing district, you know, a non-governmental taxing district.
Yeah,
And
I kind of blame it on the whole. I consider our the way we do managed development. I really think socialistic. You got the government bureaucrats deciding where you can build, where you can't build. And I'm a big capitalist, and what you should have, in my estimation, is rules of law. And part of this problem with this footprint system, and it just came up here in the last couple of years, they said they have so much land for like 40,000 more people, and they said if we don't want to expand the what they call the urban service boundary, what I would call the municipal utility service boundary, because if you try to expand the urban service boundary, then that's urban sprawl, and you've also already lost the conversation. But they don't think about if you have, let's say, 10,000 lots to account for those 40,000 people that are going to move into. Once you have 1,000 more lots sold, now you have 9,000, and you have less of something, it becomes more valuable. So it just ends up ramping up the price of housing. And then that, in turn, if people keep the same millage rates, that just ends up with an automatic tax increase coming into your local governments. So who's against it? it's hard to it's hard for me to fathom. Again, you got universal support of Republicans. Every House member and every Senate member, Republicans, voted for this Live Local Act, and it comes in, stomps all over any kind of rules you have at the local level to build rental housing. And also, I can go back to the Vero Beach when they had the ballot question. It was produced like 2,500 units, all for rental housing. There wasn't a single owner occupied house in the plan. And here we're a county that's over 50% registered Republicans. And I don't understand how it can get, I don't understand how these things go forward. It's just beyond my understanding.
well,
It,
I know that when I was running, we talked about the housing and the urban sprawl. That was TC Palm, one of their basic questions that they ask. And the lawyer ended his sentence saying, "Well, families might have to, multiple families might have to live in a larger home so they all can afford to pay it." And I was like, "What?
Exactly.
What?"
Exactly.
I mean, I was just speechless. I was like, "That is a good answer?"
Well, and if you wanna go high density, I don't have a problem with that, but make them condos. People really should have the right to own property or the ability and the right to own property. And, if you don't have that, just the political support for the Constitution goes in the toilet. And I just think of it, you look at the third world, and the problem why it can't develop is because they don't have enough property owners. And the thing that I think made the United States unique is that everybody came here and got property. You know, they're coming from feudal systems like in England, where you had to be born into property. And so we had a bunch of second sons moving to America and say, boy, we're not having that. My older brother was an idiot and he got the whole estate. So, you know, we started this way as being trying to get everybody property, and we seem to have just lost that.
Yeah, it's the opposite. I mean, even the county commission's talk was, the board, the planning and zoning was talking about narrower lot lines between houses, you know, going
Well,
from
and
20.
this part of this live local discussion, live local act at the state level, some cities that try to block were trying to make minimum lot sizes. So the state came and overrode it and said, as long as the lot size is larger than 1,200 square feet, you can't do anything about it. And I'm thinking a 1,200 square foot lot, their house is bigger than that. Or I'm sorry, yeah, no, 1,200 square feet. And
Mhm,
I mean, it's just ridiculous. So virtually
mhm.
you can't do anything about it. They come in, build housing, and even some of the worst things of that is then if they're low income housing, which I think in this Live Local Act, like 40% or something has to be low income housing. You can't tax it. So you have people moving in and no taxes coming out of it to pay for schools or roads or I mean the whole thing is totally crazy, and it got universal support from Republican legislatures. Um,
Yeah, that surprises me too because it seems like Republicans like to grow government as well, instead of leaving it up to the people.
well, I mean,
It's
they get to fund it through this. You know, when you restrict how much property you can build, the price is going to go up. And then if you keep the millage rate the same, all kinds of money comes rolling into the county coffers, the city coffers. It's an automatic tax increase. And the
well,
problem is part of it, I think, is Republicans generally are the homeowners, and so their $250,000 house becomes a $400,000 house, and they think, well, what's wrong with this? And what's wrong with it is you in the long term, you're not going to keep your republic.
no, exactly, because there's nothing for our kids. Wages haven't gone up to match the increase in housing costs. There's no way. My kids are in their 30s. My daughter's the younger one. She's in her late 20s, but she can't afford a house. She can barely afford renting an apartment for herself because
Yeah,
the
no, it's
wages
totally
just they're
the
not
world's
comparable.
the world's totally changed. I think I heard the latest deal. The age of a first home buyer is now in your 40s. And then to me, that goes down the whole social system. I look at it as guys can't see a way to get married, buy a home, have a family. They just can't see a way. So then you end up with this hookup dating, and you know
Mhm.
all the problems that causes. And um, yeah, I don't know. I just feel sorry for this next generation. We have just hammered them.
It's the suicide of the family unit,
Right.
how are you gonna
Well,
be a family?
and that's what I think, you know, and my history of it is that's what I think the Democrats want. You want to get rid of the family. You want to get rid of ownership. I think of like the Minneapolis riots of a couple years ago when they're going through Minneapolis, burning Minneapolis down. Well, they weren't burning their own houses down. They were burning somebody else's property down. They weren't the owners that had a responsibility of trying to keep their property. It was a bunch of people that were renting their housing and wanted to riot, and they riot. Um,
Mhm.
so the higher this rentership rate goes, the worse off we are. And I think one of the, what is it, Mondami or whatever, the New York mayor, he just put in a proposal to build 200,000 new apartments. And
Hmm.
again, so again, you're pushing this no ownership, no thought of ownership. Um, I don't know. We cannot survive without ownership, high percentage of ownership. And I don't know anybody that's offering it.
Well, and right now, because we're under 200,000 residents, transportation is free. Once we hit that 200,000 mark, we're going to, there's going to be, now everybody's going to have to pay for their bus routes and all that stuff. And then we're going to have to get more buses in place, because if the community grows, so does the bus line, the transportation. We're going to have to increase that, especially if people are living in apartments or they're living in condos. Not everybody has a car, and I can't see how somebody's going to be able to afford living in a condo that's over $2,000 a month and still have a car payment and have a job in this county, let alone they're going to need that car because they're going to have to go outside the county to make some money, which is what a lot of people do.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of issues tied to it. And I kind of get back to, well, you see it, the state legislature, I kind of categorize, before the mid 1980s or something. And Florida had kind of a laissez-faire economic system. It was private property, but you could pretty much do what you want. And then that got tightened up, and I think they replaced it with a socialistic system that became this footprint that you have to build within this footprint. And then I think that creates artificial shortages, which drives up prices. And they did in 2011. They got rid of the Department of Community Affairs, which kind of oversaw the whole um, what I would call smart growth program here in Florida. But I don't think it's smart. I think it's really socialistic growth. And they got rid of it and kind of flowed the how you're going to develop back down to the counties. So like our county, I think has been pretty restrictive in growth, and now because people need workforce and stuff, they're building apartments. But like Polk County, I spent a fair amount of time out there or talking to people that got a couple people that like me, so I go out there and talk to them once in a while. But they're building like crazy, and so they have the
Mm.
other problem of just massive traffic jams, and it's just a mess. And I think you really have to come up with a capitalist system, which is a system of rules. You set up the rules of what you're going to have, and then that's what you follow. You get rid of the socialism, you get rid of the laissez-faire system, and have a capitalist system. And I don't hear anybody talking about it.
No, I love like the old Vero neighborhoods. They have bigger lot lines. It's like owning your property and not, being able to spit on your neighbor's window, because you had your space, you had your house, and everybody was felt safer back then too, because everybody invested in their homes. When you own a home, you take better care of it, and you understand that you got to work and you got to pay bills, and you have a lot of accountability with that home, and it makes you a better American, I believe. And that's where capitalism comes into play, because you want to keep working hard to pay for that home and keep that home. And it's just so different when you live in an apartment or you live in something that's not yours. I like your idea of, have condos, have people own their condos. But in today's day and age, how much is a condo going to cost now? It's almost going to cost as much as a house with smaller square footage.
And that's the problem. I mean, you end up making land so valuable that you really want to end up, or the people end up building condos, but then there are a lot of costs that have been brought into those now. So I don't know. I don't know how it all ends, but it's not going to be pretty from my standpoint. And another thing on homeowners, kids from homes that are owned do much better in school. I mean, I don't know any downside of trying to increase the home ownership rate. And what I would like to see is a moratorium placed on the building of apartments. I mean, it's just, you see apartments going anywhere. You drive up, I drove up, and this has been a few months now. I drove up to Melbourne, up US 1. You come into Melbourne on the south side of there, it's unbelievable. And then they're putting in a big thing in Fort Pierce. If you go over the South Bridge on the west side of it, they're putting in three 30-story or roughly 30-story apartment buildings there. I just think it's unbelievable. And what this Live Local Act did is if you have any building, and I'm not sure if they allowed for some that were pre-existing, but in the example of Fort Pierce, anything in the county, if there was a building permitted that was as high as what you want to build, they have to allow it. So you have the nuclear power plant down there is like 30 stories high, the dome of it. And so they want to build these big high rises. And since they have the nuclear energy production there, that building, so any kind of apartment building you want to build, they have to allow it to the height of that building, which is like 30 stories. So,
Wow.
and I can't imagine what's going to happen on the south side of this Indian River County, because they built that nice, big, beautiful bridge that's going both over the Indian River Lagoon and over the railroad tracks there, and that's going to dump into A1A, heading down the south side of our county. I just think our beaches are going to be overwhelmed. I just think it's going to be something.
Yeah,
Um,
we really don't have the roads by the beaches to, handle a lot of traffic. I mean, there's still like small town roads over there. And
right.
and so I moved here in 2004 and loved the county, loved the town, and bought a house, an older couple moved out of, and it was a ranch style home, loved it. And since then, I've seen the increase. It just feels like it's getting cluttered. It feels like there's too much development. It needs to slow down.
I,
We need a moratorium to stop development right now.
Well, I don't think you have to stop development. I think you have to stop development of rental housing. I really, everybody talks about affordable housing, but they never put in the kicker: is it owned or is it going to be rented? And I think if you're building rental or if you're building owner occupied housing, that's a good thing. But if you're building rental housing, what's the end game? And the end game, I think, is we end up losing our republic. I think
Yeah,
it's
because most of that rental housing that's being built is big corporations, like Trump was talking in the State of the Union. He, banned large Wall Street investor firms from buying out homes in the thousands. They'll buy out property like that and then build their homes. Kind of, I saw it in Colorado where my daughter went to school and now lives. All these new buildings, or they bought a building, gutted it out, and redid it, but they put so many amenities in there. You got a pool, you've got tennis courts, you've got this, you've got that. And just to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment, you're looking at $2,000.
right. And building no equity. But also what's gone on is because I mean, it gets a little complicated, but you now have investment firms building up single family home, but there'll be rentals, thousands uh, in a development. And again, I think the thing you don't want to have is rental properties where people are not building up equity. They're not taking ownership, pride in ownership. I just think it's a mess, and I don't hear anybody out there talking. And, you talked about the last uh, election in the county, and these, young guys getting going, talking about building affordable housing, and I just think, you know, what we have to do is put ownership in there. We need to have
I
affordable
agree.
ownership, not affordable housing. We need affordable owned
Ownership, that's
homes.
right. That's right. I agree with that 100%. Affordable ownership. I mean, I was looking, I didn't get into my first house, but I was in my 20s. I think I was 24, 25, around there. I was in my 20s, and my daughter's 28 and she has a master's degree, and she's still working on it because she's got a student loan, and housing is so expensive. So it's when I look at it and when I look at my own daughter, I'm like, there's hundreds and thousands of them just like her out there that would love to have been in a relationship and gotten a house, but it's just so stressful on the younger generation right now. What are we leaving behind? You
Yeah,
know?
totally
And
agree.
and that's what I love about Trump is he has that capitalist way of thinking, like, look, let's make it so that everybody can own a home. Let's make it so that everybody can have a job. Let's make it, he's looking at the economy in that sense as well. But at the same time, when he was talking at the State of the Union, he had mentioned that they were going to try to fix that, but still not in a way that, houses would still increase in price, but still there would be affordable houses. And I was wondering, okay, where's he going with that? Because he's a builder,
Yeah,
you
no, I
know?
was wondering too, and I think he's looking at it on the finance side, but really on the supply side, who's building the houses? You know, it's usually state and local issues, and I don't know if it's here. I think it's an environmental thing. I get back to the bond. Was that the last one or two elections ago where there was 50 million bonding to save land or buy land or whatever it is? And that's so popular and it's so destructive. And I just think it said 50 million, but I think it would have passed that 50 billion. I mean, I don't think it's even rational anymore. And then you also end up with the voters. I mean, if you're a property owner voting to buy this land in the county for whatever reason, you're going to pay for it. And you are if you're a renter too, but you don't see it. You think, well, why shouldn't we vote this in? I want to save the land, and
Hmm.
it's not going to cost me anything. So why wouldn't I do that? And so, to me, if you have responsible county commissioners, those things never go on the ballot. And it did, and I think it's a major problem. And I really think our republic, uh, there's kind of a tipping point here somewhere where we can't recover. And I hate to be too pessimistic, but the problem is if you get Republicans in there that govern like Democrats, build a bunch of rental housing, we're already down that path, and I don't know if you can recover from it.
I'm right there with you. I feel discouraged, because who's going to get in there and make the change? And we've got a lot of people. It's all in the hands of the voters, really. It's the way everybody is voting. Everybody's very comfortable with their lives moving on, and they don't pay close attention to what's happening until it bites them in the butt. But otherwise, and that affects how they vote. A lot of people, I've met people that say, I never vote. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we need your vote. But they'll complain about how things are going. And they say that's why they don't vote. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So that's why I've been trying to get it out there and say, everybody, you have to come and vote. You have to vote. You have to show up and vote, and just don't wait for the general election, vote in the primaries.
Well, yeah, no doubt about it, and that's what we're talking about. And you vote August. That's why you can say it to anybody. But part of the problem is people start leaving here in a month, and if they're not already clicked into the system, or they're not going to even know there's an election going on in August. So
Hmm.
it's a problem, and I don't know how we. I think on the other side they have a lot of NGOs and the non-government organizations that do a lot of this stuff, and on the Republican side there really isn't very much of that stuff, and I think we're getting out strategized. We just can't get people to the polls. There are a couple of special elections up in Orlando in heavily Democrat districts, and had the Republicans turned out 30% of their voters on these special elections, they would have won both of them. One was a state congressman, one was a state senate. And we just have no way of doing it. There's just, I don't know, we've looked into getting some of the databases people are working with them, but I think we look at Indian River County and Vero Beach as being a small town, but there's what 160,000 people, and it's a lot. You get one of these spreadsheets with all the voters, and it's a lot of information.
Well,
And
and I think a lot of Vero Beach people are so comfortable living in the past saying, hey, we're a red county. We're a red county. It's like, guys, with all these people moving from California and New York, we're not so red. We're on the verge. We could lose that in one election, you
yeah, I'm
know?
not I'm not so concerned about that. It's what kind of red. If you end up
Yeah.
if you end up electing moderate Democrats that love smart growth, we're down the same path that there's not a good end to it. And I am talking, if I can put a plug in here, I am addressing the REC at 6 to 6:30 on the 11th at the Heritage Center. They're giving me a half hour. Maybe they'll give me the hook after 10 minutes. I don't know, but I did want to go over what I call demographic strategies, and Republicans just don't do them. And I even think of like Joe Biden. Everybody looked at him as a terrible president, but what his inflation did, along with the housing prices, is I look at Democrats or people that are alienated from the system. And if you're renting your house and you see all these prices going up, you're going to get alienated. If you own a house and you have 20% inflation of the Biden era, your house goes up by 20%. So you're thinking, big deal. I'm paying back my mortgage with cheaper dollars. What do I care? But those renters are just getting killed. Their
Mm.
rents go up. They have no wealth increase. They're voting Democrat. And that's how it's going to go. And I think that's how it ends if we don't do something about it. But I'll be at the Heritage Center on March 11th, 6 to 6:30, talking about this stuff. If anybody wants to show up, just say you're a guest of me, Steve Meyer. Um, you'll hear a lot.
Yeah, I like how you do your data, my Steve. I mean, you pay attention to this stuff, and a lot of people just don't have the time to do it. But you take the time and you look at it, and we do need a better strategy to take our republic back because that's what I feel like. I feel like we're losing it, and we're not leaving anything left for our kids.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of problems too. When you don't have demographic strategies, once you lose an area, you're gone. There's no representation. You have nothing going on. You're just gone. And so I asked AI, I said, hey, how many of our 50 highest population cities voted for Trump? And the answer came back as zero. I do a lot of looking at county data, so I don't have a lot on the cities within the counties um, generally. And I mean, think of that. The 50 largest cities in the US, and Trump didn't carry a single one of them. And to me, I think it's on purpose. You get this demographic that renting their housing, you put in smart growth systems so that younger people can't afford to buy a home, and it just turns Democrat. And then you end up with Mondani in New York that's going to build 200,000 apartments and ask the federal government to help him build it. And
Yeah.
he'll probably get it.
And he just fired 5,000 police officers.
Yeah, I don't follow it that close.
Yeah,
You
I
really
just
don't have to look at the news and know what's going to happen, right? It's
yeah, yeah, and, the other conversations I hear are the smart you say smart growth, we're talking about the smart cities where they have you walking everywhere. That's what they wanna put here as well.
Yeah, all of a sudden or just have somebody walk around here August to somewhere. If you're in Florida, it's August. You take a couple block walk somewhere, and how does that work out? It gets so hot. I think it's just amazing that. But I love that hot weather. But
Yeah,
if you,
we have the open mall up in 95 that kinda after COVID, a lot of the malls shut down, but even the open mall, I would never walk all over the mall. I would drive to the closest store, get in my car, and drive to the other store. It's just too damn hot.
No, that's right. I'm originally a Minnesotan going way back, and they have these skyways that are heated, so you can go between buildings because it's so cold. And I thought that's what they should do here in Florida, have these skywalks that are air conditioned so you can walk places without having to go outside. But
So, Steve, how do you really feel about the no tax on home ownership? Do you think that's a great idea?
yeah, I think it is. I don't know how you afford to do it is the only thing. And I mean, I think you can see who's feeding at the public trough too, kind of by seeing who's against it. But I mean, to me, that'd be nirvana is you don't have property taxes because really, if you have property taxes, you really are kind of leasing your land. Or I always think of it as
Mhm.
like they get 10 feet of your property and you got to buy it each year when you pay your taxes. So I think it's great in concept. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to pull it off, but great in concept.
Yeah, I was talking with my husband the other day and I was saying, well, they give over $4 million to nonprofit organizations of our tax dollars. So maybe if they actually did a doge of their books, they might figure out that, hey, we're wasting a lot of money instead of, being more conservative and putting it where it really belongs. I mean,
Well,
we're
I think
paying
if you're,
taxes and they're
it's
wasting it.
especially if you're in like Minneapolis, where I've got a lot of it, stuff coming out of there, where boy, they just took billions and nobody even seemed to notice. So you think
Yeah, so you're
if they
wondering
didn't
like,
notice that,
okay, yeah,
they
why are we
didn't
paying
notice that, why
taxes?
would they notice if we don't pay our property taxes?
Uh-huh, but I like that idea because you're right, I never wanted to live in a mobile home because I could own my mobile home, but I had to rent the lot on the mobile home lot. But that's
They-
basically what we're doing when we own our house. You pay off your mortgage, you pay off your house, and you have some tragedy that happens in your life and your taxes are too high, and they can take your home, the thing that you've worked for your entire life and
Boy,
been a good steward of your taxes. But a tragedy happens and hey, we're going to take not just your house but everything that you have.
yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense, but I love hearing Trump, DeSantis say that. DeSantis is really fighting for that, and I really hope that they everybody votes to not have taxes on the ballot, because that'll be a good slap in the face and we'll have to redoge everything. But I think it's totally possible. I think it's totally possible.
Well, the only thing is what's the political ramifications of it too, and part of my thing is if people are renting their housing and paying those taxes, and the homeowners aren't, they're going to be more alienated, more likely to stay voting Democrat. So I don't know. There's a lot to it. My answer is always capitalism: free up the property systems, lower those prices so the taxes become inconsequential to you. And the way it is now, we're pricing our young people out of everything. It's just a sad, sad situation. And so I don't know what the answers are, or I think I do. That's a problem, is I think you have to free up the property system, go back to having a capitalist system, and again where you have rules. It's not a laissez-faire system where you do what the
Mhm.
heck you want. If you want to see how that goes, go to Polk County. It is something. But then I was at a meeting there. I was addressing a meeting there about it, and one guy brought up, I thought, an excellent question. He goes, on some of these housing developments, the houses are so close. He says, I remember in Colorado Springs one time they had a fire because the houses are so close together. The fire just jumped from house to house to house. And I don't know if we're thinking about that either. If a safety deal, if you have put all these properties within 3 feet of each other, is there a total disaster thing happen? We have fires here in Florida, right? The dry season in the spring, and is that a possibility? And I just answered, I have no idea. I've never thought about it.
Well, and then when you think about it, like we're the people in today are not the same people that we were when we were younger. They're more divisive, they're more angry, they can't handle, being indifferent from each other. That just Charlie Kirk got killed because he was having dialogue. So if you're living on top of people, oh, God forbid if you wore a Trump hat and your neighbor's, a far left leaning person, you're going to have these disputes happening right on properties because people are so rude. I mean, I've worn my Make America Great hat and it's just a little visor to Publix, and walking outside of Publix, some lady literally walked past me and said something derogatory, and I'm like, "Really? Like, it says make America great. You don't have to be Republican to believe in that." You know? I like the slogan. It's
Yeah,
like,
no,
I want America to be great.
no, I was watching a replay of a broadcast that he was a well-known national editorial writer, and at the end of it, he says, "I have a twin brother that no longer talks to me." He goes, We no longer have or family gatherings," and I'm like, wow, how do you get there?
Yeah, it's like and we're gonna have people living on top of each other. I see not house fires with flames. I see people getting into fist fights, getting into, war, personal angry fighting wars in the hallways, or, scratching people's cars. I mean, people just don't have any respect for other people these days. You just see it at a level that it's never been seen before. I grew up in New York City, and I see it at a level that I've never seen growing up in a busy city like New York City. There is absolutely no tolerance. And then there's all of this racial divide that shouldn't even be there, but it's perpetuated constantly by the left. And people just you can't even look at somebody because they'll think you're looking at them the wrong way. It's just so unstable. I can't see people living on top of each other. I think that's just, we're asking for trouble because these personalities that are in the world today are very divisive. And I don't know if you've seen that, but
Yeah, not so much. Like most of my family is pretty aligned with me. I mean, I'm on the outside of their comfort zone, maybe, but I don't know. We're capitalists, I think most of us, and I just think it's a system of private property coupled with the rule of law, and I don't know what else you could possibly want. But Joanne, we'll have to get you running for something again here. Get you out.
yeah, no, I don't think I'm gonna run for anything, but I wanna help people to get to the polls and know that it's important for them to vote and primary, and then get people like you on that can help them learn more about the strategies of the government and capitalism and everything that you have to share with us, because it's knowledge that people could use, and maybe it'll bring them to the polls in the primaries and uh,
Well,
make
I
our
hope so, and I hope
make our
so, and
election
thank you.
stronger. Yeah, so thank you for coming on, and you're going to be at the Heritage Center again on March 11th.
Yeah, from 6 to 6:30. It's the pre-meeting, so you can come there and just say I'm here for the speech and walk out afterwards or whatever, or tell them you're a friend of mine, which I hope you are by then, and you'll get in the door. And I think it's pretty interesting stuff. But thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. A lot of problems out there, but there's a lot of solutions too. And I don't know. I think it could work out, but we got to get to work.
Thank you, Steve, and I look forward to having you on again to update us and give us some more information on elections and any other data that you can share with us.
I just think vote August. And thanks, Joanne.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here at Binford Chronicles. I hope you enjoyed Steve Meyer. He's a great guy. Remember to go to the Heritage Center March 11th, 6 p.m. It starts, and join him. Join everybody there. You will get some great information. So, we're going to close it out here with a message from Trump, and I'll see you next Thursday.
Our country is winning again. In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it. People are asking me, please, 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 Mr. President, we're winning too much. We can't take it anymore. We're not used to winning in our until you came along. We're just always losing, but now we're winning too much. And I say, no, no, no. You're going to win again. You're going to win big. You're going to win bigger than ever. And to prove that point,